viewers. I guess everyone can hear me now. Just let me know, write me a little message to say that it's okay. I feel like I can hear myself, Deck, so I don't know what that is. Hello. Hi. Brilliant. Okay, so you guys can hear me good. So the idea of today is for questions and answers, get as many things. Over the last few weeks, we've done quite a few seminars. Deck, I can really hear myself. Do I sound odd? Okay, so
you sound fine. You need to, if you turn your computer down, you're hearing your own echo, I think. So if you
I've done that, that should be better. Okay, good. All right, I think, is that better? Everyone can hear, I'm not repeating, so I should be okay. All right, so the idea for today is loads of questions and answers. I've got a few slides to show you. I know we talked a little bit about pre-colouring and re-colouring, so keep them coming. When we do the questions, just make sure you type it in the question one, so it's a blue one, so if I miss anything, Deck will kindly put all those up. So, is everybody here? Yeah, oh, we've got a good little team of guys here today, so that's good. And we will start with the first question of what's the difference between the Lux Activator and the Cream Activator, and what should you use? Okay, so in terms of levels of lift, there is no difference. So 20 volume in Lux Activator will act the same as 20 volume in Cream Activator, so that's no problem. Everything is fine for that. The difference between the activators is the Lux Activator is cream, and it's got a thicker cream, and it's got argan oil base, so it's a little bit more conditioning if you like, and is recommended with MC2 and Julieta. One of the other questions that I also get asked a lot is how comes there's no cosmetic fix in the Lux Activator? Do you guys wonder that, or do you guys know? So if I repeat myself, I'm really sorry, but you can say, we know that already, Jude. If not, I'll carry on repeating. The idea is that when you're using the Cream Activator, it's a lot more fluid in the consistency. You'll notice the difference. And when we're working with cosmetic fix, we need to work really quickly. And normally it's 1 to 2. So the product is diluted really well, and it works through the hair very easily, very quickly. So that's why we didn't produce that in the Lux Activator, because it's a very creamy, thick substance. Lux Activator, if you're asking me personally, I love for all my high lift tints, gives me really good precision. But Cream Activator, I love for my bleach, because with bleach, you need to measure. With bleach, you need to measure, of course, we measure absolutely everything now. But consistency-wise, for my bleach, I like mine a little bit looser. So if I use the cream instead of the Lux, then I get that consistency that I like, and still fitting exactly where my manufacturer's instructions say. So we've got there, MC2 is better to use the Lux. Well, if you're using MC2 for ingredient space, then I would say yes, because you've got the argan in there, and so that's giving you that nice nourishment to the hair, the same if you're ingredients focused. But for lift and coverage, absolutely no difference at all. 20 volume is 20, 30 is 30. So it really is personal choice. And it's no problem if you ran out of a little bit of Lux Activator and you thought, oh no, I haven't got enough left. You could use some Cream Activator as long as it's the same percentage. Does that clear that up for you guys, for the developers, so that you guys know what's what? You can give me a little thumbs up, or just say yep. Any other questions about the developers? I know that you guys now have got 5 volume. So 5 volume, just to remind you, is for the nudes and metallics. Also 5 volume is great, brilliant, thanks guys. Also nude and 5 volume is really good for your in blondes. And the idea for 5 volume with nudes and metallics is you don't get any lift on the natural hair. Of course, if you're using it with in blonde, for the moment, we are looking at changing the formula for in blonde so that you don't have any of that lift as well. But any time that you need to, you've got an all over bleach and you've got no natural hair, it's always better to use 5 volume or 10 volume. And you can use 5 volume is only in the Luxe developer. Okay, so let's do the next question, Dec. I will keep looking at those little ones unless it relates to what I'm talking about, and then you can just keep putting them up. What is the best use of Pure Gommage? Okay, it's a multifunctional shampoo actually, but it's a specialist shampoo for Pure Gommage. So you're going to use it after colour removers, so SOS Utilities, you would use it after that. And before, if there's a lot of product build-up. You're going to use it after a direct dye remover. You can use it before perms. The idea with Pure Gommage is it's a high pH for level 9, so the idea of it is not to scrub it into the scalp. When you use Pure Gommage, you gently massage in at the scalp, and most of that is pulled through the hair. Does that make sense for Pure Gommage? It's not a retail. It's not something I would recommend for retail. It's definitely specialist shampoo in the salon and not to be scrubbed in, for sure. All right, so let's have the next question. How to get, yes, actually, definitely I am going to do that. I'm going to show you now the presentation. So do you have tips on how to get the best coverage on 100% grey hair? I'm going to show you now. So we're going to talk about pre-colouring. So one of the things that you'll notice the differences is terminology. So actually it's something that we're working really hard on at the moment to make sure that we have sort of like a glossary of terminologies so that people can all understand. Because I don't know about some of you guys, but when I trained, pre-colouring was pre-colouring for white hair or pre-colour for if you're going from blonde to dark and that sort of thing. But we've separated it at Sens.ús. So pre-colouring is anything that we do for before colour that's not had any colouring. When we talk about re-colouring, that is our going from blonde to dark, for instance, or a few shades. And re-colouring is because the hair is already coloured, so we need to re-colour that to put colour back. Whereas pre-colouring is that first pre-colour before it's even started colouring. So hopefully that explains those two terminologies for you. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. First, one of the big things that I want to show you is this, a little slide here. And this is about the amount of product that needs to be applied. So you can see, I don't know if you guys can see, I've got a little pencil, but right at the beginning where it says 10 volume, you'll see just a little beige strand, and that's our strand of hair. And here, can you guys still hear me? I'm all right. Because it says my internet's not very strong, although I'm in the best spot. So thank you. Yep, good. Okay. So here we have a strand of hair, and this is showing us how much, because what I notice is when we switch products or we go from another company to Sens.ús, one of the biggest things when we're not getting 100% grey hair coverage is often product application. So we have to make sure that our sections are no bigger than 3 millimeters, 2 preferably, and we need to think about the amount of product that we apply. So when we're looking here, we've got 10, 20, 30 and 40. So you can see 10 volume just needs a small coating of product, usually because we're darkening and we don't need any lift. So what happens is we don't need a lot of product to keep the oxidation process slow here. It doesn't matter if it's fast, because with 10 volume, maximum is going to be about 25 minutes. So that can go on and happen very quickly. So we don't need a great deal of product. When you look at something like 40 volume, you can see it's almost double the amount of product. To get the best lift, you need quite a fair bit of product. So we need to think about how you apply it. So I often talk about not brush strokes where you paint it on up and down. I talk about laying the product on really neatly, so it keeps with your roots very precise. If you've got large roots, it's good to reverse your brush and do the part that is here. So if you've got a large root, you would start at the bottom piece and you'd reverse so the brush would come upwards, so you could get a really neat line, and then you would do from the scalp to that line, and that would give you a really, really neat piece and also allow you to put the correct amount of product on. So with 40 volume, we need more product. And why do we need more product? Because we need our oxidation to be slow, because it needs to take 55 minutes when we've got 40 volume on the hair. So this is actually a really important process. So for example, if we don't apply enough, if we were using 40 volume and only applied enough like 20, what would happen is we'd get the first part of the lift and that would happen, but then there's too much oxygen to it and we won't get that lift enough. So it's really important that it's compacted, that we're keeping that in and we get a thick layer so that we can lift enough. And this is really important when we talk about grey hair coverage as well, because often with grey hair coverage, so I would say in the last 20 years or so, 25 years, 20 years of being in hairdressing, in the very beginning, we thought about grey hair coverage as in covering natural. So all the colours were quite natural. And now we've developed and our products have changed. And it's really the idea of colouring cosmetic colour now. All cosmetic colour covers grey hair. All of it, because it's tested enough times. The problem is generally the hairdresser. One, we haven't chosen the correct product. Two, we haven't chosen the correct volume of peroxide. And three, often we don't apply enough product. Does that make sense for you guys? Are you guys still all with me? Yep, brilliant. So what happens is often nobody is really 100% resistant hair. Brilliant, thanks guys. And nobody really, I would say there's not many, we still have a few little dark hairs. Sort of, I would say our average age group between 40 and 60 still has a significant amount of natural hair in there. And what the problem is that, for example, if we choose a level 8, for example, that's our target shade, but they're a level 6. So that's 2 shades of lift that we need to make sure that we cover. If we're just doing that on natural, like, I don't know, something warm. So our target shade is 8.3, and our natural hair in between the white hair, and it's over 50%, is a level 6. Generally, we know we need to use 30 volume because we've got 2 levels of lift. We need to make sure that we do that to get to a level 8. Does that make sense? Even if we were, often we were taught that 20 volume would lift 1 to 2 shades. Not always does that happen. Very, very fine hair, maybe it would, but generally 20 volume will only lift 1 shade. Now comes the tricky bit, which often people sort of don't think about so much. When we think about our level of lift, we've got our white hair that will cover perfectly to an 8.0. If we've used 20 volume, which we were taught years ago, whenever you had grey hair, we would use 20 volume, right? Everybody says 20 volume covers grey hair, and that's what we would use. At Sens.ús, we encourage all the time to be using 30 volume, even 40 volume for white hair coverage. 10, 20, 30 and 40 all covers white hair. That's not our problem. Our problem area is our natural hair. So what will happen is if we use 20 volume with a level 6, we're only going to lift to a level 7. So our natural hair becomes a level 7 and our white hair stays at that level 8, and that's covered perfectly at level 8. Then next to the level 7, it looks like our white hairs haven't covered because it's not true. What's happened is our white hair is perfect level 8 because that's what it's tested for and we've covered, but we haven't used the correct peroxide to lift our natural hair next to it to come up so that the balance is correct. Does that make sense for you guys? So we've got application and the amount of product, and we've also got making sure that we use the correct amount of... Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about pre-picking now, so we're going to go on to that. So application, the level of peroxide used, and also what's really important sometimes at our translucency is because the client likes a natural, so a 0.0, or the client likes a 0.2 or perhaps a 0.13, and what we're doing then is not maybe using 30 volume when we really need to use 40 volume. So for example, still staying with our client who is a base 6, but her target shade now is a 0.0, so she doesn't want to be 8.3, she wants to be 8.0. Generally we would use our 30 volume again because it's 2 shades of lift, but when we're thinking about anything that's natural, it's got an ash background, anything that's a bit cooler, we need to lift half a shade more. Sometimes if it's an ash, 1 whole shade more. So our radial melanin underneath gets a little bit lighter so we can show off the ash tones. And this is what happens where we see the translucency. So we're using 30 volume and we want something like an 8.0 or an 8.1. What happens is the natural hair lifts and we get to an 8, but the radial melanin behind is really golden. So actually it looks like an 8.3, which is perfect if that's their target shade. And then the white hair has covered perfectly to an 8.0, giving you that translucent feel next to the warmer shade. Does that all make sense? So we've managed to get the lift, but now we've got translucency maybe because we've got the gold and the ash next to each other. Yeah? I'm saying thumbs up. So we need to think about that. I'm going to show you a chart so that will help you with the melanin that's behind the hair, because that's a really important factor. So actually my choice of product with that, if my target shade was an 8.0 and I'm still a 6 and I want an 8.0, maybe an 8.1, my idea would be to use 40 volume because I need 3 levels of lift. I need to lift past the radial melanin so that it's a little bit lighter, this allowing the ash to show through. If it's darker, it will always look like the radial melanin yellow behind, it will always look warmer. So I'd actually use 40 volume for that. Yeah? Okay, so let me show you now if we're going to talk about pre-colouring. So the objective to pre-colour. We have talked about, so let's start how we're going to pre-colour. So first of all, we're going to, we've chosen our target shade and perhaps it's an 8.0. So our objective is gold or natural, and our we need to go 1 shade lighter. So if we're looking here, we're going to use something on a 9 with a golden shade. So perhaps we might use a 903 or a 9.3 to pre-colour. Our pre-colouring will be 1 to 2 with cosmetic fix. So low volume of peroxide, and because we're using a low volume of peroxide, do you remember when I spoke just a moment ago about the amount of product that you need? You don't need a lot of product, so use it sparingly. Often you find that most people with resistant white hair is definitely in spots. I've only got, out from my client base, probably 3 clients that I would say are 100% resistant, and they've got that really thick, coarse, wiry hair. Generally everywhere takes really nicely, but I may have these couple of little spots that don't give you enough coverage, and it's those little areas that you'll see. Now, how do you make a difference? How do you tell the difference between resistant hair and normal white hair? So generally you will be able to see this when they come back. So you'll look at the hair shaft, and you'll look down, and you'll probably see banding in the hair, and it will show you, because it won't be everywhere. Everywhere else will take lovely, and there'll be a couple of little spots, little areas that you look and you'll see like bands. And this is where it's translucent, and then the next time they have their hair coloured, the hairdresser overlaps that band, and then it covers and is perfect. So we need to look out for these areas, and then we understand better the resistant areas, and often it's always in the places that people notice the most. So right where their parting is, on the temples, generally around the front. I have no idea, but it never seems to be in the back, where they wouldn't have noticed anyway, and it would have been fine. So does that make sense of how to find those areas? All right. Great, so we're going to talk about here our objective, anything on a gold, 0.3, or a natural, 0.0, we're going to look at pre-colouring with a golden shade. If we've got, we're pre-colouring here on an ash, copper, red, or anything with violet. So say, for example, 5.7, and we know she's resistant, so she's got some white hair, so we're going to use 5.7 with 5.0, or 5.7 and 6.0, for example. That would be my choice. But I've got some areas that are a little bit resistant. I'm going to use 6.0 on those little areas that, with cosmetic fix on those areas. I'm going to apply, leave for 10 minutes, and unless you've put too much product on, then you can use a towel just to dab it off, or a tissue or paper, something like that, just to dab it off. Don't comb, because if you comb through, you're going to pre-colour hair that's already coloured and it doesn't need it. And then you're going to create little bands for yourself. So be really precise where you need your pre-colouring. And then you apply your target shade straight over the top for the full development time. Is that good? Here we are for anything on the browns. So look, we're pre-colouring a brown. So we've got 3.6, something like, yeah, I'd say 3.6 are really good. We're going to pre-colour with exactly the same shade. So if we're using 5.36, we're just going to use 6.36 to pre-colour with. Okay, the only one that's a little tricky is anything that's on a mahogany. So we need to pre-colour with a level lighter, but we need a little natural and a tiny drop of the red, and that will give us a really good coverage on the mahoganies. You know, sometimes when you see ladies with really white hair and they colour it red, like a mahogany red, and they always seem to have a little glowy root, this will be why. So we need to think about our pre-colour here. So that's just the example that is a little bit more precise. All right, so how is that for everybody? Does that cover pre-colouring, white hair, the amount of product you need, the correct volume of peroxide? I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about choice of peroxide in a bit, because I think it's really important. Any more questions on that for now? All right, hit me with the next question, Dick. Okay, so apart from cool and warm bases, how else would you decide to use MC2 or M3K on my client, please? Okay, so I think, yes, obviously the warm and the cool situation is the most important. Julietta, actually, if my client wanted to be much cooler, Julietta would be my choice, because MC2 is to the cooler side, but it's just after neutral. So it's not warm and it's not cool, it's cooler. So that would be, yes, your first port of call. But also I think it's important to say ingredients wise. And also for you guys that are thinking about your clients' time of life when they're thinking about having their colour. So do they need any changes? Often clients will say to me, I've got a lot of hair loss, or particular times of stress, they get a lot of hair loss. Perhaps I might change to MC2 rather than using M3K. MC2 because it's got a lot of acacia berry inside too, and that's really good for anti-aging. So often when clients are telling me that their hair is feeling very dehydrated, sometimes like this, I might swap to MC2. Maybe if they're brighter in colour and they say my colours are fading too often, I might switch them to Julietta because we've got the luminous sheen in there, and that has a power to help reflect that light. So that's really good for longevity. So really those types of questions I'm going to be thinking about. What is their problem areas with their colour or their hair at that moment? So if it's feeling dry, dehydrated, hair loss, perhaps they've changed medication and they're not getting enough lift. Most people would say, oh, when you've got medication and things, they'd go to MC2 because it's the most natural. Yes, indeed, I would say when I say the most natural, it's a cosmetic colour, so it's not going to be natural, but it's very gentle with ingredients as such. But sometimes when people are on quite a bit of medication, it's quite difficult to get that lift. And even if we do crystal gel first hand or maybe the week before just to help with that, sometimes we can't get that lift. Maybe it's changed and the hair feels much coarser. Sometimes there's these differences. I would think about using Julietta because it was designed to give more light reflection and more lift. So those would be my changes. M3K for me, M3K for me is a really when I've got some clients that just like a really easy neutral colour. They like their little roots to be done. And they don't have to think about it too much. Perhaps I don't have to think about it too much. And it's, you know, something that is probably easy work as such. Maybe I might M3K. I tend to try to train all like my future professionals up using M3K because it's probably the most recognised next to other companies in the market, as it's the most traditional and the most classic. So I am lucky because I do stock each one, but I know that's not the same for everybody. So if you've got one or the other, and I hope those have given you some good ideas of how to choose between brands to help with your client's colour. Any more questions on that one? You guys are all okay with that? Great. Okay, Deck, let's do that. Does the new FARD contain PPD? No. Can you use nectar as a treatment, and can you use it with semi and demi colours? Okay, so nectar is actually perfect for use with semi and demi because it really helps to, I would say, demi colours, because remember our semi colours are FARD directs because they are not mixed with any oxidation. Demi colours are mixed with 10 volume or 5 volume, for example, and they become demi. So they change the tone of the hair more, and they'll last a few more weeks than semi-colours. So semis are truly with no oxidation in. But nectar, adding nectar makes the perfect demi colour, and you're going to look at, for the perfect mixture would be to 100 grams of total product, you would use 33 grams and that of nectar, and that gives you the perfect demi colour. And then the roots will just blend through rather than permanent colour where you get a hard line, and that would give that. I don't use nectar, and we don't recommend to use nectar as a standalone treatment. And this being that nectar is designed to work inside the hair. So the nectar needs a carrier to travel inside the hair. And our carrier is, of course, our colour. So that will carry the nectar with inside to the hair where it's changing in the cortex, and it's changing the melanin of the hair. And the nectar inside there is helping to keep the hair in good condition, help with the fibres, perhaps helping to repair that hair that's been quite damaged. So I always use nectar after bleaching because I think it's a great way to tone, and I want to get it just inside the hair, even if it's just a little bit. Nectar is great for that. The idea for the treatments for nectar would be the recovery kit. So you guys have seen the shampoo, the mask, and the recovery spray, which I think, if I'm right, is about £30 as a kit. And that would be treatment after and to follow on for the nectar. If you want to do standalone treatments, I would recommend, with something like this, I would recommend mixables, because you have 20 grams of mixable in the cream, and then you can add different levels of filler for you know, damaged hair, very sensitized hair, and very sensitized hair. So you've got 3 different types of really intense treatments there. So I'd recommend that. And of course we went over for the repair masks last 2 weeks ago for Illumina. So hopefully that answers some questions. Anything else on the nectar? I'm not sure who asked that one, so if you guys can think. Can you mix nectar with direct colours? Okay, so you can with bang colour and pastels if you want to. By the way, the direct colours already contain nectar, so I wouldn't necessarily, if I want to pastelise them, I would use clear. It's much more money efficient to use clear than to use nectar. It would be a waste of product with nectar. Remember, with direct colours, they sit on the outside of the hair and only penetrate just a little bit, whereas nectar works inside the hair and it needs to be carried in with a sort of permanent colour. So that would be my answer for direct colours. You don't need to, because it already has the ARC technology inside. Okay, why does the app never suggest cosmetic fix? Because often what we're doing at the moment, Michelle, is having a look at different toning ways. So often when we're doing, for example, demi colours are always done with 5 volume and 10 volume, because they change the tone enough, and we don't use cosmetic fix for that. We use cosmetic fix for toning only on bleached hair generally, with some natural in between. So if we're looking at 10 volume and 5 volume, that's why that will always, and to darken we would always say 10 vol, so 10 vol would be there. We are updating the app all the time, so there will at some point be a toning area so that we can choose with that to help people when they're looking at the hair, whether they think it's an 8, 9 or 10, because then that changes whether we've got some natural hair in there. But when you think cosmetic fix is really low volume, it's just purely for toning. So I hope that's answered that question for you. All right. I think what I would like to do now, I'm not sure if there's any other questions. How are we doing with the other questions? Was that the last one on that so far? All caught up, brilliant. So what I want to do now is I want to show you recoloring. Okay, so for example, if we're recoloring hair, because I know that just to make you aware of pre-colouring and recolouring, it's slightly different. The things that are the same is that we're going to use a low volume activator, so usually Cosmetic Fix. It has the same amount of developing time, so 10 minutes. Here, what we talked about before, removing the excess if there's too much on, squeeze a little off with some tissue. Apply it only where you're needing it. So for example, if somebody's got hair and it's got like a patchy band, only apply it on that band. Don't go above where it's a nice colour already or it doesn't need that. Just think about where you're applying it. So it's being really conscientious of your applications for recolouring, because effectively you can make it everything end up being quite bandy together. So we are, and the same here, what we've said, using one shade lighter than your target shade. So if we look at recoloration here, so we've got a similar pattern in the fact if your objective is gold or anything natural, so 0.3s or 0.03 or 0.0, you're going to recolor with gold. If you're natural, don't recolor with a natural because often you'll end up seeing it will be quite flat. So we need to think about having a little bit of gold behind there to help with the balance and stop the fading. So that would be your objective, gold and natural, and you're going to recolor one shade lighter with that. Here we've got some recoloration for anything. You can see here we've got mahogany, red and violet. Underneath this, and often our violets are the ones that fade particularly, we're going to use one shade lighter. So if we were going to use 5.7 here, we're going to use something like 6.5 here on the red. That makes sense? So one shade lighter, 1 to 2, Cosmetic Fix, apply it on that area, leave it for 10 minutes, and then be able to take through. So for example, let's just do that last one. And anything that is on the browns, use the same shade, but one shade lighter on the same tones. So for example, here we've got the phases and what we're going to do. So the recoloring phases. So we've got phase 1. You can see here we need to recolor that blonde hair. So that would be our first phase. So we'll apply that. We don't leave it 10 minutes and then start phase 2. We would do phase 1, and whilst we're doing phase 2, our phase 1 has already had its 10 minutes. So we can just do a follow-on effect. So this way it doesn't take up any more time in the salon. It will just be a natural progression. And then the last phase would then be able to take your colour through to the mid-lengths and ends. So what I want to do is talk about a little bit about the colour that you would use for the mid-lengths and ends. So for example, our roots are a 5, and that's what we're colouring with. We're going to do roots with 20 volume and our 5. But our ends keep fading up. They're sort of between a 6 and a 7. They're wishy-washy. So we know we need to put something here. If our roots are a 5, we need to do 6.3, shade lighter, with the gold, if you remember at the beginning, through on our phase 1. So 6.3 will be our phase 1 with Cosmetic Fix 1 to 2. We're going to apply the product. We're only going to apply it where we need it, so perhaps it's just the very tips. She's got an old balayage or something like that, and we just want to cover those over. So we're going to apply it to that area, and we're not going to overload the product. We're just going to apply it and massage it through, give it a little comb with a wide tooth comb and leave it. go straight to our roots. We're colouring with 5.0 and 20 volume. Now, what do we do about phase 3? Because often with phase 3, people will put a 5.0 back over it, and maybe with 10 volume. My idea for you guys would probably to be suggesting to do a 6.0 over that top, or a 5 and a 6 together, because what happens is the areas that don't need too much, when you think about a 5.0, if you apply 5 on top of 5 on top of 5, it becomes really dark. So it's just a natural progression that it will end up being sort of like a 4.5, sorry. So it ends up being really deep. So my idea is that whenever we need to refresh colours, perhaps we're going to do the roots of 5.0 and she's got half a shade lightness on the ends, I would recommend using 6.0, 10 volume and nectar. This way creating a really nice demi colour through the ends, really good shine. The nectar will give it a fantastic shine, also help the hair get back into its original bounce, which is really important, and you won't have too much depth. That will be really nice on top of, and will keep it remaining looking like a level 5 all the time. So that's really important for me. And when I'm using nectar for any of my recolouring, I'm only going to use a fifth. So that's 100 grams of total product, for example, but only 20 of nectar. Why? Because I want more colour and just a little amount of nectar to go in. Do those little things make sense to you guys? I think sometimes, often we can get into reapplying the ends all the time. So for example, 834, if you ever need to take 834 through the ends when you need to refresh a colour, use 934 with nectar. And of course you don't need any of the natural base because it's already coloured hair, you're just reintroducing tone, you're not covering white hair. So perhaps the roots are 8.0 and 834 together, but you'll only need 934 through those ends to refresh. Because I find with things that have got gold or copper in, the more, that have got gold in, the more gold on top of gold on top of gold that you apply, it can end up looking really muddy and really flat, and you lose that shine and vibrancy of the 3.4, of the 0.34, and you lose that. So think about trying these things. These are what we're recommending to do with the nectar. It's really, really lovely. So I'm hoping that helps you there. Oh, I forgot this one. If you guys want to write this down, if you are unsure of how much percentage of white hair, I know we spoke about that in the beginning, and I forgot that I put this one in for you guys. So I knew you'd probably want it. 0 to 40% of white hair, 3/4 of your target shade, and only 1/4 of the natural. When you've got really high levels, sort of 100%, then maybe you could use 3/4 of the natural and only 1/4 of your target shade. For example, if your target shade is 6.5, you're going to need 6.0, for example, and you need more of the 6.0 and a little of the 6.5 to give you a really good coverage. So I'm hoping this one, I think, is perfect, this little one. So if you guys want to scribble that down, I would say yes. Feel free for that one. 2 that I want to go through, I think. Am I okay to move on, or do you guys still need this one? Do you want me to stop here for a second, or are you guys okay? Just say, if you're okay, just say, okay. Okay, perfect. So I want to move on to the melanin. This part for me is really important. So here we have the chromatic scale, the hair color that we see. So this is what we'll actually see. the melanin behind and what leaves our residual melanin is the colour that's inside the hair. That affects all of our choices. It affects our choice of even white hair coverage. This one is really important. So when you're looking, when we make the colours, they always start off with a 5. And what they don't do at Sens.ús, which some companies do, is dilute down to a 6 or add to a 4. What we don't do is 5 is our starting point always, but every shade is then done individually, so we're not a dilution. So that's a really important factor. Often when you move from one company to another, or when you've got a stylist who's new to you guys, that's okay. Emma, I'll put it up at the end for you. So when you've got a new stylist coming over, it's really important. I remember years ago of changing from one salon to another, and really realising what we shouldn't have done then, or what they shouldn't have done for me, is they just said, oh, you're out on your own, and really didn't give me the inside information. And one of the things that I love about Passion, and for us all being together like we are, is that if we're all using the colour and we're using it really well and we're sharing all these tips, when you've got a new stylist in, these are the things that you need to be sharing with him or her. You really need to make sure, because when they're colouring well and good hair colours are leaving your salon, it helps to raise that level in your salon. So it's no good when you've got someone that's new coming in and you're not giving them all the information. I know they've got to put in for themselves, but it's also down to you as a good team player to make sure that you're acting your part and not keeping them secrets to yourself, and sharing and making sure that they're achieving the best results possible. Firstly, because they're in with an amazing team of people, because they're in your salon, right? But secondly, they're using fantastic colour, and they get to be part of a great education and support network as Passion. So those are the things you need to be encouraging. So when you're thinking about moving and you're looking at a 9.0, for example, in other shades, is very different. It often seems, they will actually, you're really right. These webinars will really help to install. They really will. When you're looking at a 9.0, for example, in some other brands, it's very different to our 9.0. And I think these are the reasons that you need to be explaining about how they're tested, how our level 5 is the starting point and it's not a dilution down. So it really stays on target of what you see in that book, really represents what you can achieve on the hair. And that for me is really important. So here we've got our blonde, our level 7, and you can see that our level 7, this is the most difficult part, from between a 5 to a 7. This area here, from being red and orange and yellow, or red-orange, they are the hardest bits to make a difference with, and they really affect our colour choices and our level of peroxide. So let me show you this slide, because this is really, really important. So I'm really sorry, because some of it is still in, my sister's just walked in, so I was that waving. She's 2 meters apart, she's going to collect stuff and then she's leaving. We're not socialising. Well, what here, you'll see our cold tones. So we've got our naturals, our beige, and I would say our double zeros. We need to make sure that we're lifting one whole level lighter. So if we're picking anything that's on an ash, so my client has chosen to be an 8.1 or an 8.1. My target, my idea of colour would probably be 8.1 or maybe some 8.11. And then their natural shade is a 6. maybe it's a 6, but maybe it's a 5 in some areas. So now we've got a little bit of a problem. Perhaps it's a 6 through here and it's a 5 through the back. What are we going to do to help achieve that? So if it's a level 6, we can use Julietta 8.1. I use Julietta because it's my coolest shade, and also it's my idea of it's the most lifting. The idea for it is it's a lifting product. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, with the ammonia, with everything that's in it, that's my result. It's the coolest, so I'm going to use that. Now, generally from a 6 to 8 is 2 levels of lift, so we normally use 30 volume. But we know that we need to have our residual melanin looking like it's a level 9. So let me show you, flip you back to here. So our target shade is 8, and we know on a target shade we've got an orange yellow. How is our 0.1 going to push through and reflect on that at an orange yellow? It would be more difficult. So underneath the hair, behind the scenes, if you like, we need to make it lift to a level 9. We don't choose a level 9. We have to do this lifting action with the peroxide, because whatever colour we choose, whatever peroxide we use, the peroxide gives us the lift to that colour. So if our target is an 8.1 and we use 40 volume, we're going to get to an 8.1, because we're going to lift and make our residual melanin look yellow, so our 0.1 is going to show more. And we're going to think about doing all of that with all of these natural shades. Is that making sense to you? You know, when sometimes you say, oh, I didn't get enough, like it's still a little bit warm, and my client is like, oh, the hair's still a little bit warm. So I read like this for me, honestly, this was my aha moment. I was talking with Michaela about how we can make this really more simple for people to understand, and I thought this part is the best part. Now, do you remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about Julietta lifting booster? You can put a little thumbs up if I'm making sense to you guys. So for example, if lifting booster can give us half a shade, and sometimes on finer hair it can give us a whole extra shade. So my idea would be to use 8.1 lifting booster, so I get, because if you remember it's still an 8.1, but we're going to get a little extra lift, so I'm going to use that, plus I'm going to use 40 volume. I'm going to get a really, really good clean 8.1 in that. So if they've got a little bit of 5, perhaps it's around the back, underneath, where it's a little darker, less sun exposure, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully that makes really good sense. When we're thinking about anything that's golden, so 0.3s, anything that's copper golden, what I was talking to you guys before, I was saying to you 3/4s, 4/3, they're much, much lighter and brighter, and the feel behind those colours should be much lighter and brighter as well. So when we're thinking, all right, we need 1 level of lift to go from a 7 to an 8.3. So we can use 20 volume. But we know that really we need to do 1.5 levels of lift. If it's very, very fine hair, we could still use 20 volume. But if it's quite thick hair, we need to use 30 volume. I know it's only 1 level, but actually it's 1.5 levels, because the residual melanin behind, if it's very orange, our golden shade will look darker and deeper and more intense. Whereas we actually want it to look brighter and lighter and more shiny and maybe more honey colours. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys of thinking about peroxide choices. And of course, anything that's very deep in colour, coppers, reds, mahogany, violet, we can keep on the same tone. So we don't need to think about lifting it a level lighter to show that red. Actually, we like the red undertone or the copper undertone because it supports the red and the copper. So that's okay. But we're just thinking about our beiges, our golden shades, just the 0.2s, we really want to get the best results with them. The 0.2s are so beautiful, and if we use a high level of peroxide with that, so if you think, oh, it's only 2 levels, that's all I need, oh, but it's a 0.2, go with the 40 volume. Don't worry about the 100% grey coverage. I promise you that grey hair covers with 40 volume. At some point, if we're no changes at the weekend, I'll make sure that I do the little swatches for you so you guys can see that. Are there any questions about Optimum Lightening? Does that help you? Does that give you a few different ideas with some clients in your mind that you think, oh, I can really start to change that? If your golds and your coppers are a little intense and a little bit too dark, you could really go ahead with using a little lightening oil and using 20 volume lightening oil. You can try the lighter shades with perhaps a 30 volume on the root, but you know this is a bit dense and they're just like, oh, my colour feels really dull, really heavy. Just use the lightening oil with 20 volume and comb that through for the last 20 minutes, and it will really give you that really sunky, sunny, golden feel. And it just gives you an opportunity to change and work that with your clients. Oh, yeah, I love this one. I'm really glad. Thanks, Helen. That's brilliant. It was my aha too. I was like, gosh, it's made such a difference to my colouring. You guys love the lightening oil to break the base. Yes, you guys breaking the base. It's not something I use a lot of down here in sunny Southend, I have to say, but I know that you guys use that a lot. It's a great way to blend, you know, when a client doesn't really have time to get their roots done, but you just want to sort of fade it through. It's perfect for that. I really like it. It is good. Any other questions that you've got for me? I know I said I'd do the recolouring and pre-colouring for you guys, but is there anything else that you need from me today? I think we covered quite a lot actually, didn't we? Yeah, it does give a lovely sun-kissed look. Lightening oil is our baby in the salon for almost everything. Application for large roots, yes, I can. So when we talk about application, let's have a little look. So for example, we've got a 2-inch, which is going to be really important now. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, Michelle. So when we've got a large regrowth area, for example, so the client is perhaps 2 inches. The most important bit is normally what we would do is apply from the roots and we go down. So we'd just go with our brush. But what happens is we'll get a perfect amount of colour on the roots, but less on the ends. So then our roots colour really well. Then we'll get like a little bit of a bandy situation going on here because we've not got enough lift. And then the colour's lovely there. So what we need to do is reverse the brush. So normally we would paint down. So we want to tilt the brush up the other way and paint it so we touch it on the roots. So here's my coloured hair. I'm going to touch it there and paint up the hair almost, but I don't brush up to the root. I just apply the colour. Then I would apply my roots down to that line of colour that I've put on. Then you know you've got a really good amount of product from the bottom of the regrowth to the actual regrowth from the root, and you'll have the same amount of colour in that area, which is really important. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I think we're going to have a lot of that and we're going to think about doing that. That's also a really good way when you're doing your bleaching and you've got to I already can think of a couple of clients that are bleach regrowths and I go, never over more than 5 weeks, make sure it's in. And I know now we've got like a few extra weeks. So I would be doing exactly the same, taking very small sections. We need to be doing the second part of the root first and doing that everywhere and then applying to our regrowth straight away. No, don't worry, I think you'll be fine. I just wouldn't charge them for a regrowth, by the way. I'd make sure that you're charging for a global colour because this is really important about now. when they're saying, get rid of my roots, and then we do the roots. But don't. Make sure it's for a global colour, because you're going to be doing a lot more work, and that just takes a little bit more time up as well. But you'll get a good amount of lift then, and that's the most important bit. Does that help with my explanation? That's good. What else have you got for me, you guys? Yep, brilliant. I think that was the last one. Oh, that's the one I think that you missed, Emma. Can you recommend a toner formula to create a silver grey? Yes, my favourites are 11.7 and 10.11, Julietta, and that gives a really nice silvery grey. You could use 11.7 and 10.11. You can use 11.11 if you want that lighter feel. And also think about your colour that you managed to lift to. So if you're using an 11, you must make sure that you really lifted the hair to a level of 11. Because if it's a 10, you really need to be using a 10. You're not going to get that good toning situation. And I always pre-tone, so I'm always using Platinum Dawn. It's probably one of my favourites. Don't forget I use mixables with a little zero yellow conditioner inside, so I'm helping to tone whilst that second part of the mixable is on the hair. So that's doing that stopping oxidation job, but it's also sneakily doing a little toning action at the same time. But that is probably my favourite. Oh, and I really love Iridium, by the way. If you guys have not used the metallics, the Iridium is gorgeous. And when you reapply Iridium, make sure as the second toner, don't do Iridium on its own, do Iridium with Nectar, because you need it to be a little bit lighter so that you keep that silvery tone. Otherwise it ends up feeling quite grey. Just a really good tip for you guys when you're using your greys and re-going over them, especially with the metallics, because they're quite intense. All right, guys. So if that is everything today, I hope that we've managed to cover quite a few questions for you. White hair coverage, this one, that's probably my favourite, and this one, of course. I love making sure that you apply enough product for you. I think we are good. You are welcome. So it's good to see you guys. Let's all stay safe and have a good VE day tomorrow. Mad social distancing. There are street parties everywhere. So I'm sure that everybody is keeping social distancing under good control at the moment. And I can't wait to get back to work. I'm guessing you guys are all the same. You're welcome. It's really nice to spend time with you. I've really enjoyed these, and I hope that we manage to keep these up. I think even if we do like a monthly webinar or something that's interesting, I think it would be really good. So I'll chat with Debbie and Daniel and see what we're going to do for the future for these, because I've really enjoyed them and I feel like we've really got a lot of information across on them. And we're able to go over a few things. And of course, my lovely Declan, he's always behind the scenes helping me. So thanks. Not bad, seeing as I had a phobia for computers. See you guys soon.
See you later.
Have a nice weekend. Look after yourself. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Just got a super quick announcement, guys, for tomorrow. For VE Day, Daniel's presentation has been moved from 11 to 5 minutes past 11, so everyone allows everyone to observe the 2-minute silence.
Oh, brilliant!
Just so you guys know. But thanks once again, Jude.
You're welcome. Thanks for that.
Enjoy the lovely weather, and we'll all check in with each other tomorrow.
We will. See you guys.